What is up, world? Jeff Lerner here for another installment of me talking on video. Today we are talking about the 3 best reasons for becoming an entrepreneur now. Not before, not later, now. Why should you become an entrepreneur right now, today, in this moment? In this video, I'm gonna break it down into 3 reasons, but actually these 3 reasons, they're like 3 faces of one reason. One big overarching reason why becoming an entrepreneur is the right move for you right now in the world today. And that reason is so the one reason is because entrepreneurs just have a better go of it these days. Entrepreneurship is totally where it's at. Entrepreneurship gives you way more option in this world. It gives you way more success in this world. It gives you a way more optimistic, positive mindset in this world. It gives you a way stronger sense of control and self-determination in this world. And here's why. Because ultimately, fear, anxiety, uncertainty, it all comes down to control. Not to get too deep, but although very much in life we tend to operate in a way that assimilates us into a controlled environment. You know, we get the degree so we can get the job, so we can be told what to do and told what to wear and told where to go and told how to speak. And we go through the steps so we can, even in relationships constructs a lot, very few relationships are really operating in the healthiest paradigm of just, total empowerment and freedom and openness and supporting each other and blossoming and flourishing and becoming the best version of themselves, of each other. Most relationships are kind of more modeled after parents and grandparents' generations, where it's about fitting into structures and, domestic models. And again, not to get too deep, but so much of what we do in this world is about signing up to be controlled at some level or governed by assumptions or existing paradigms, but yet deeply we fear being controlled. We fear a lack of our own control, our own autonomy in this world. Look at children. Childhood is a progressive sequence of getting more and more comfortable through indoctrination, through discipline, through punishment, through gradual acceptance of a relinquishing of our independence, right? Kids want to do what they want to do, but over time they learn they can't just do what they want to do, and we kind of assimilate into that way of being in the world. But deeply, we're animals. We want to have freedom. And so the reason being an entrepreneur is so deeply satisfying is because you have control, which means you have less fear, you have less anxiety, because you actually have more confidence that amidst the chaos, amidst the uncertainty of the world, you'll be okay. Especially, I think the reason it's so timely right now, this conversation matters so much right now, is because we're living in a world that is so racked with uncertainty and so racked with chaos. I think for a lot of people, the sense that they had kind of entrusted their okayness or their control in a model or in a society, in a structure that has lately been shaken a little bit and kind of shown that maybe there's some cracks in the whole system. That's deeply unsettling for people, because they go, man, well, I gave up control. I plugged into this machine, and the machine is supposed to take care of me, but now it seems like maybe the machine is a little broken. Well, what am I going to do? Because I gave it up, right? I gave up my self-determination and my responsibility. And so as entrepreneurs, we're like, oh yeah, bring it on. We'll be good. We're like the guy from 300 years ago who's like, I don't care if it breaks. I know how to fix it. I don't care if I run out of food. I know how to farm the land. I don't care if the natives attack, because I know how to fight back. It's almost like the prepper mentality, only we're not prepping for natural disaster. We're prepping for economic reality. And we've been prepped because we've been doing it ourselves for a long time. That fundamentally is why being an entrepreneur is so cool, and especially right now, why it's so relevant. That said, I'm gonna actually break it down a little further into, like I said, 3 different reasons or 3 different aspects maybe of that one reason why it's just so cool and just so appropriate right now to be an entrepreneur. The first one is, as I said, the old model for success, where we kind of give up our control and we entrust ourselves to a process and to a big machine, the machinery of corporate America, the machinery of traditional establishment education, the machinery of traditional institutional finance and banking and pensions, and just there's a lot of these big, almost monolithic paradigms in the world that we've just been going along with now for maybe, whether it's 20 years or 50 years or even 100 years. They're a little cracked. I won't go so far as to say they're completely broken right now, but they're showing some wear for sure. And deep down, I think we have to ask some bigger questions. And those questions aren't the point of this video. I'm not going to do an exhaustive analysis of the Social Security system. I'm not going to do an exhaustive discussion of the Federal Reserve banking system or the traditional state university education system, or there's the bloated federal government. There's a million things I could talk about that we've entrusted huge amounts of control and responsibility to in our lives, the average person's life, that are like highly dubious. But the point of this video isn't so much to like pick those apart. It's more to say, okay, well, what's the one size cure all for all of it? And I'm suggesting is being an entrepreneur, because then you're not beholden. There's a lot of subtle psychology that history teaches us about, as people give up their freedoms, what can happen to them. And it can be very corrosive to morality. And even, I'll give you an example. Yesterday on the Millionaire Secrets show, which is a podcast and YouTube show that I do, I was interviewing a guy who's a world-renowned expert on cybersecurity. This guy's trained at the CIA, he's trained at the NSA, and he was saying that something like only like 20% of hacks, of system hacks, are actual penetrations of technology. And like 80%, I think it was 78%, are actually human exploitations of human fallacy or human weakness. And the fundamental human weakness is you go find a person who lacks control. He said, you go find a person in an organization that has access to sensitive data. This is what hackers do. And they find a person who's got tax liens or who's behind on child support payments, who in some other way is out of control in his life and doesn't have the tools or the skills or the resources to regain control in their life. And you go to that person and you offer to give them back a sense of control. You say, listen, we will wipe the slate clean. We will pay off your taxes. We'll catch you up on child support. You'll get to see your kids. You won't go to jail. You won't be fined. You won't lose your job, whatever. But all you got to do is give us this one little code that gets us 10 million credit card numbers or whatever, right? It's 78%, if I'm getting the number right. I know it was around 80%. Of all hacks are exploitations of human weakness in cases where human beings are not in control. So you could reasonably make almost a moral argument that entrepreneurship is like the ultimate global security system of individual liberties and individual privacy and individual data. Because if we were all entrepreneurs, we would all have the wherewithal to fix our own challenges and we wouldn't be susceptible to that kind of exploitation. Now, admittedly, I might be stretching this a little far, but also, am I? Let's assume that I am, all right? Let's assume that I'm not going to go too far down this path because maybe it starts to get a little crazy or uncomfortable for people. In fact, let's bring it back to the context of security that most people are very, very familiar with, which is simply, man, I just want to get a job. I just want to get paid. I just want to have a steady paycheck. Okay. Let's put it in that frame. All right. Let's talk about being entrepreneurial, having the skills of being an entrepreneur in that lens. Let's say that myself, I'm fortunate that I know one case study of an entrepreneur very, very well, which is me. It's my own life. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 16 years old. I've had one job in my life. It lasted for 3 weeks. I got fired. I think I could reasonably say I got myself fired. A nice act of semi-conscious sabotage because I knew I was out of place, answering to the man or being told what to do and all that. And so I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years. I'm 41. I started when I was 16. So I have a pretty good experiential case study of entrepreneurship. So let's put it in this context. Let's say that you and me are interviewing for the same job. If most people's lens of security is about being able to get a good, steady job, let's say you and I are going up for the same job. And I'm 41 now. I'm a lot more functional and socially adapted and less rebellious than I was when I was 16 years old. Now I'm an entrepreneur because it's fun and I enjoy it, but I have a family, I have 4 kids. If I had to get a job, I would. So let's say that you and me are interviewing for the same job, and let's talk through some of that interview, those interview scenarios, because I'm going to suggest that the best job security is actually being an entrepreneur. Because entrepreneurs walk into a job, you may not have the resume, you may not have then again, recommendations. I have 1,100 recommendations on my LinkedIn profile, right? What's your employer going to go look at? They're going to look at your LinkedIn profile, or potential employer, and they're going to see 1,100 endorsements for me and almost 50 paragraph by paragraph recommendations from people that I've collaborated with over my decades as an entrepreneur. So it's not like I'm lacking in actual evidence or credentials of my professional caliber results. But even all that aside, let's actually go through just credentials or resume or referrals and get into the actual skills, the actual ways that we would answer the questions. And I don't know you, so you might be like, well, I would smoke this guy. But I'm going to tell you what I think I could bring into a job interview based solely on a track record as an entrepreneur. And to set this example up, I'm gonna refer to a concept that's become kind of a hot thing in corporate America, or I know corporate America, maybe it's in corporate Europe too, but I can only assume. But at least here in the United States, this has become a big topic in corporations, is this concept of intrapreneurship, where companies are actually they're recognizing the industry and the value and the energy that comes from entrepreneurial thinking. And they're taking entrepreneurial processes and psychology and actually trying to adapt it and integrate it into corporate structures. And they've created this concept of intrapreneurship, where you're like an internal entrepreneur within a department or within even a project. And so, especially in this day and age, I think that as an entrepreneur, you're actually better qualified to compete and win for most jobs than even most people who have jobs. So again, let me kind of take you through some hypothetical job interview scenarios. So let's say that we're talking about a marketing and sales position, and somebody goes in and says, well, I did 10 years in the research department at this agency, and I studied data and I built analytics reports, and I did some really cool stuff, or maybe I was in charge of the copywriting, or maybe I was in charge of creating the brand initiatives or whatever, awesome stuff, right? I walk into the same interview, same conversation, and basically say, look, I have expertise in all of it. Whatever you need done, I can do. And I'll tell you straight up, I've worked the entire process from taking cold audiences and warming them up by having the right conversation at that stage in the buyer journey or the pre-buyer journey. I know how to deliver on front-end reputation. I know how to deliver on front-end branding. I've built a loyal following. I have a 4.9 star rating across multiple review platforms. I went from an audience size of 0, and I organically scaled it up to having an audience base of millions and millions of warmed up people who had loyalty and awareness of my brand. I've taken cold audiences and converted them into buyers. I've converted those buyers into repeat buyers, and I have the data to support that. I've taken my average lifetime value of a buyer and doubled it and tripled it and quadrupled it through optimizations in the funnel and in the process. And I've built the sales teams to support that. I've created sales processes. I've managed sales processes. I've managed operational processes. I've managed support processes to be able to scale, convert marketing into sales, scale marketing, maintain reputation on the front end, maintain quality on the back end. I've quality controlled support up to build teams at scale that produce the same level of hands-on mom and pop feel goodness that we did even on customer one. I've, by the way, done all of this and learned how to come in under budgets in a way that one can only learn when it's actually their own money. You talk about, I managed a budget of $5 million or $10 million, great. I managed a budget of whether it was $50,000 or $50 million, it doesn't matter, because if I didn't come in under budget, I was out of business. I couldn't go to the shareholders. I couldn't go to the boss. I couldn't go to the bank and say, hey, I can't, I was a little late on this deliverable, or I was a little over budget on this project. Can you help me out? Can you bail me out? Can you give me some more time? When you're an entrepreneur, you don't have that luxury. You learn how to manage resources in the way that you only can when it's your own resources. And you talk about, what does it take to be successful in the world of modern business now? Creativity, adaptability, innovation, improvisation. I had to reinvent my business 3 times over a roughly 12-year period because of changes in the fast-paced marketplace. And every single time I pivoted, I pulled back without collapsing. I pivoted and I rescaled up to over 8 figures. Each time I built teams, they never expanded beyond 50 people because I kept them lean. Again, because when it's your own money and your own resources, you're responsible and accountable in a way that you could never be when you're playing with other people's money. And I scaled each of those businesses up beyond 8 figures. One of them was over 10 million. One of them was close to 30 million. Currently on one that's up to almost 20 million. I've done all of that while being the leader, while being the visionary. In 2 of those cases, I was also the integrator and the operator, and I've also learned how to build an executive team now with training and integrating an operational partner. I've trained marketing people. I've trained finance people and systems and administration people to be able to offload all of these skills. I know how to train, I know how to lead, but I also know how to serve. I know how to serve from the top. I know how to serve from the bottom. And I could keep going and going and going and going. Honestly, I could sit here for an hour telling you all the stuff I've learned how to do as an entrepreneur. How is somebody going to come in and compete with that? Because they worked in a job. The best job qualification you can have now, because the marketplace has changed. It's gotten so fast-paced. It's gotten so dynamic. It's not about what you know anymore. It's about your ability to learn fast, to learn and implement on the fly. Nobody does that stuff better than entrepreneurs. So even if your model for stability is a steady paycheck at a job, start a business on the side, become an entrepreneur on the side so you can develop this whole other world of skills that are only, even if for no other reason than because they're going to increase your value in the marketplace. The biggest challenge, not to be cocky, but the biggest challenge I would have going in and interviewing for most positions would be that they would have a sense coming in, that they weren't willing to or able to pay me what I would demand or what I was worth in that position. That's not a bad problem to have. That just means you go aim higher. That means you call up the headhunter and say, hey, you guys have me interviewing for positions below my pay grade. I want to move up a level. By the way, how much of this world is just confidence? How many good jobs, great jobs, not just okay, mid-level, cog in the machine jobs, but great jobs where they're looking for leadership and they're looking for energy, are won on confidence. And I promise you, no job builds confidence like scaling your own business. Become an entrepreneur, if only because it qualifies you to thrive both in entrepreneurship and outside of entrepreneurship in a way that nothing else in this world will. And the second reason to become an entrepreneur now is because the internet has completely changed what it takes and what the opportunities are in becoming an entrepreneur. It has first of all, it's leveled the playing field. Like anybody can do it. Anybody who's got connection, who's got a device and a connection to a reasonable internet, consistent, reliable internet, can become an entrepreneur. That really wasn't the case 20 or 30 years ago. And there's actual model, it's not only changed the access, but there are actual models that's changed the investment required. And I'm not actually talking about money. I'm really talking more about time, energy, resources, and skills. And in terms of skills, it's more about, I'll say this, there's 2 aspects of skills, not to get off track, but one is nobody really has been taught the skills. So somebody to go into entrepreneurship now, very few people are able to lean on what they learned in school because schools aren't teaching. I know I'm hiring people that are coming out of school and schools aren't teaching what it takes to be an entrepreneur now in the digital economy. That's one of the ways it's leveled the playing field, is because internet information moves faster than the educational establishment. The educational establishment can't possibly be teaching people what they actually need to know to compete in the market now, which means we're all starting at zero. So when you go out to be an entrepreneur, it eliminates a lot of what you deal with in a traditional job context where, so-and-so's been in the industry longer, so-and-so's got more experience, so-and-so's got more history, so-and-so knows all this stuff, maybe they have a PhD and whatever. Those are legitimate challenges to overcome in traditional business. On the internet, everybody's starting at zero. So that's one of the ways it's leveled the playing field. It's not just the opportunity and the investment and the time, it's leveled the educational playing field. In a year of self-study, out of a few good books and on a few decent websites, one of which is right here on YouTube, by the way, you can know not only enough, but way more than most people that you're competing with. And so in that sense, you eliminate one massive excuse, which is preparation or experience or education. But then also the fact that anybody, you don't have to make a full-time wholesale commitment into the direction of starting a business. You know, in the old days, you start a brick and mortar business, where you're gonna start a burger shop. It's like 70, 80 hours a week commitment, right? I know people who make a killing online working an hour or two a day. Now, maybe that's not how they started. Maybe either they worked more than that to get the things started, or they worked that much, but they didn't make the same money for a long time. But either way, they were able to start by applying whatever they had, whether it was time or money, whatever was available, they were able to get started and get traction and build up to the place where, you know, frankly, anybody would want to be, which is, you know, I mean, a few guys come to mind who I know make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year working a couple hours a day. Now, let's be honest, the guys you see online are claiming to be that make millions of dollars a year. Nobody's doing that in 2 hours a day. I mean, if you're making millions of dollars a year online, you're probably working full time. You might be working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. But hey, there's people that work double shifts, 60 hours a week, to make like $30,000 a year. It's not such a bad gig if you're working a lot, getting paid 10 or 100 times the average, right? But in any case, all that stuff's available to a really broad base of people in a way that it never was before. So the internet has just completely changed what it means to be an entrepreneur. So, and I'll use myself again as an example, even if only from an educational context. I believe that, as I said, earlier in this video, I believe I could go in and compete for not any job. I mean, if somebody's looking for a neuroscientist, I don't think that I'm going to go compete for that job because I scaled online businesses. But I actually believe enough in my ability to learn that I think that if I wanted to take a few years and become knowledgeable enough to be a neuroscientist, I believe I could do it. And I don't think I would need to go hire a university or pay $100,000 for a degree to do it. It's actually all online. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is whatever it is you want to do, the same things that would qualify me to go compete as an employee, or that would qualify me to go compete as a consultant. And I've done consulting gigs. I mean, I don't really pursue it that much because I like working on my own businesses more, but I've had probably my best consulting gig. They paid me $25,000 to come in for a day and consult them on, sales management processes and actually do some direct coaching and training with a sales team. What's that? $3,000 an hour for a day of work. Not a bad gig. And the same skills that allow me to grow and lead my own business as an entrepreneur. I learned 100% of those skills online. I majored in jazz piano in college. Literally, I majored in jazz piano. I say that. What I learned playing jazz piano was improvisation, and I use that every day too. But frankly, I've developed my improvisational skills as much through entrepreneurship as I did through playing jazz. But beyond that, kind of quirky, relevant thing of improvisation in music, 100% of what I use every day to succeed, whether it was as an employee, if I chose to be one, a consultant, when I choose to be one, or an entrepreneur, which mostly I am, I learned it all online. If somebody says to you, listen, there are opportunities in the world today that will better qualify you for what you're already doing and qualify you for potentially better alternatives to what you're already doing, and best qualify you to ultimately create a complete path of freedom and not even need what you're doing. And it's all available to virtually anyone at, fraction of the cost that would even have been conceivable a decade or two ago. Somebody says that to you, which by the way, I'm saying that to you. How do you say, not interested? How does that work? I don't know. Millions of people do it, but maybe this video can help. That's why I'm shooting this video. That brings me to my third reason, which again, I said these are all kind of facets of the same reason. The third reason is just the extent. I want to kind of expand on the extent to which education has become so available and so affordable now that it is itself, I believe education has been completely eliminated as an obstacle to progress in this world. There's a bunch of videos online you can watch now where guys like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Warren Buffett are talking about how education is or college education has become essentially, I think they actually go a little further than I do. I mean, they go so far as to say it's almost completely irrelevant or worthless. And they're looking at it through the lens of their organization, which, for those guys, admittedly, Warren Buffett isn't saying that it's completely worthless. What he's saying is that going to a really expensive school and going to a much more affordable school are equivalent, right? That going to an expensive school doesn't really afford you any advantage. Whereas, guys like I saw Elon Musk, I saw Peter Thiel and Zuckerberg, all basically saying they don't really care. They don't care if people have college degrees. You want to go work at Facebook. They just want to know if you can do the thing they need you to do, and have a lot of these other sort of intangibles that I've talked about here in this video. And again, none of that stuff is really learned in college, but there are highly relevant skills. And again, for the record, I'm not anti-college. I think there's very specific things where we have to have governance and standards. For example, nursing. I don't think that anybody who just goes online and hires an online nursing consultant to give them a made-up certification, I don't think that person should be allowed to go change catheters in a hospital. I think there need to be standards that are maintained through bigger, more structured organizations like nursing schools, right? There's certain things that I think college or secondary education is necessary, but in general, I think we need to have a lot more of a results focus and much less of a paper credentials focus, right? And that's why I think I could go in and compete for any job interview. Even as long as I could get the interview, I think I could get the job. There might be interviews that I couldn't get because I don't have what they consider the relevant experience or the relevant credentials, but I think I get my foot in the door and I get to talk them through what I know and what I can do. If it's something I have relevant experience in or even an interest in or time to prepare for, I think I can land the job. Because I think once you get to talking and people, at the end of the day, people are primarily concerned about they're primarily concerned about results and covering their butts. So again, the only reason I wouldn't get a job is because they couldn't cover their butts. Like if they were like, well, this job requires a PhD, and they hired me without a PhD, and they were worried that they might get fired for hiring somebody without a PhD, then I'm going to pass the cover their butt test, right? And I might not get the gig. But if it's somebody who's focused on results and it's something that I think I can bring results in, I don't think it's going to matter whether I went to college or not, right? And certainly if you're in a forward-thinking organization, that's likely to be the case. And frankly, as an entrepreneur, though, again, I'm probably being overly focused on being able to land a job in this video because I just know that's so important to so many people. But the reality is, and this is hard for people to really grasp, as an entrepreneur, you really don't need a job. You don't even need to worry about it. And the nice thing is you don't need to worry about it, but you're totally prepared for it if you need to be. But no part of me wakes up on a daily basis and is at all worried about my ability to go, get somebody else to trade some money for my time. Unless it's in a way that I totally want to do and will more or less be in control of. Regardless, I just want to kind of make sure I emphasize that part of the conversation, that I'm talking about being able to get a job, but that's not really what it is. It's about being able to make getting a job optional to irrelevant in your life and create all this freedom and create all this flexibility and create, like I started the video by saying, the number one fear reducer in life, which is a sense of empowerment and autonomy, that you're not beholden, you're not dependent, right? And to think that in the world we live in, the reduced dependency concept has traditionally been sold through an ever-increasing structural model called the funded education model, right? Where it's not just education, it's education that's filtered through a high cost and an increasing pyramid of exclusivity, right? Like where you say, well, the most valuable education is the most expensive education and the one that's given to the fewest people, right? Like, Peter Thiel had a really good conversation where he's like, if Stanford and Harvard ever said, we're really good at what we do, and the technology exists now that we could theoretically accept a lot more people, so let's just go ahead and double or triple our enrollment. All the alumni would freak out because they would be reducing the exclusivity of those educations, and they wouldn't have to be reducing the standards, and they wouldn't even have to be reducing the qualifications. They would just be increasing the capacity of those institutions, and the alumni, whether they want to admit it or not, would throw a fit because they're like, well, we want this to be this elite special thing that only a few people can get, right? Like that structural model is so ridiculous, given that 90% of what they teach you could learn just as well at a community college And by the way, if you want to hear lectures from the smartest minds in the world, you can get a lot of them for free here on YouTube, right? If you want to learn string theory from the guy that invented string theory, there's literally a video about it right here on YouTube. And so, the weakness people have is the discipline of holding themselves to consistent measurement of progress and making sure that they're actually retaining and applying the information. But that's not we don't need to pay $40,000 a year for a whole institution to teach us to be a little more disciplined and make sure that we're actually studying what we're learning, right? Whatever. Again, this isn't meant to be an exhaustive video about the inefficiencies or frankly, the silliness of the traditional, education model. My point is, whatever you have to say about it, the internet has completely upended it. Whatever your budget, whatever your focus, whatever your desire is, there is a perfect educational fit for you on the internet. And I'll give you an example. For myself, I have a company. Like, you want to be an entrepreneur, and this may sound like a sales pitch, but frankly, yeah, it probably is. Not sorry for it. We have a really inexpensive course called the Entre Blueprint. You want to be an entrepreneur? I don't think there's anything better that can prepare you. And it's $39. There's a link for it below. And you go read the reviews, you go through the training, and you look at all the comments underneath each video. We get literally hundreds and hundreds of comments every single day about how it's not just teaching people about business or marketing, it's like changing people's lives. It's $39. I had somebody maybe 2 days ago, it's in the last few days, who said, this is the best investment in anything that I have made in years. And it is doing more to move my life forward than anything I've ever done. And they got that for $39. So the idea that education is somehow this obstacle or barrier or even has to be a high cost thing is kind of silly. But on the flip side, we all know that the more you pay attention. And that's really the value of education. That's why people, ultimately the most valuable thing about college in a perverse way is how much it costs, because it's the one thing that forces you to go there and make sure that you try to get something out of it. I think the biggest reason most people finish college is because they spent so much to start. Literally, that's the biggest reason that most people finish, because after 2, 3, 4 years, especially if they're not seeing how it's going to directly apply to what they want to do with their future, they're usually operating under, by the way, what's called the sunk cost fallacy, and isn't actually logical, but they're usually operating from the place that, man, I spent so much to get this far, so much time and so much money, I got to see this through, I got to get that degree, right? And that's the biggest thing. So if you want to invest more, because like I said, the more you put in, a lot of times the more you get out. There are very, very powerful and effective high-priced options on the internet. And I'll give you another perfect example. When I wanted to start my education company, this was back in maybe it was late 2017, early 2018, I hired someone who I knew was an extremely talented consultant and digital marketer and social strategist who worked with a lot of influencers. And I said, I kind of had a early stage, hazy vision of what I wanted to do with my education company. And I said, I need you to help me start to, put stakes in the ground to frame this out and be strategic. And he said, great, I'm 10 grand a month. And I hired him for 10 grand a month. And I paid him for about a year to help me roll out my early content strategy the right way. And it's the reason why, the work I started doing 2.5 years ago with him is the reason why now my education business has grown, as the time I'm shooting this, it's grown 800% in the last 4 months. It's like, I always take the Amazon approach and say, whatever you see Amazon, this is Jeff Bezos, he said this, whatever you see us doing in the market right now that we're getting credit for, you're actually seeing the fruit of seeds that we planted 2 to 5 years ago, and R&D and work that we were doing 2 to 5 years ago. I've always taken that approach. And the reason my business has grown 800% in the last 4 months, which by the way is further reason why I'm highly unconcerned with ever needing to get a job. But it's because 2.5 years ago, I was doing very specific work under the guidance of a very expensive consultant that I was personally paying $10,000 a month to help me make sure that, I knew the stakes were high and I wanted to make every move count, right? You can do that. And because I invested that kind of money, you can be darn sure that every time I got off a call with him, I implemented whatever we talked about. Because the more you pay attention, and the more you put in the work, right? All this to say, and you might hear that and go, he paid 10 grand a month for da-da-da. That's actually not much more than you pay. That's actually roughly comparable to what you pay at some levels for an Ivy League education. And I don't know many Ivy League schools that say, hey, do what we're telling you to do right now, and a couple of years from now, you could be making tens of millions of dollars per year. I mean, Ivy League schools don't offer that as part of their value proposition. And certainly no coach or consultant would guarantee that, but they could at least say, well, it's a possibility. And if you do everything we say, it's a very real possibility. There's a way more direct ROI, way more measurable return on investing in online courses, coaching, and consulting from qualified people who in many cases are more expensive than the cheap people you see in Facebook groups or on Fiverr or whatever. But it's still way more trackable and has a higher probability of return, I would argue, than taking on massive amounts of debt to get a degree that frankly doesn't impress most employers now anyways. Yeah, all that to say, being an entrepreneur is bad A, and I highly recommend that you do it. That said, I appreciate you watching this video. Hit me with questions, hit me with comments. What do you think? Are you ready? Are you ready to take the plunge? By the way, if you're ready to take the plunge, I have a really awesome course for $39. Click the link below. But even if you're still undecided and you just kind of want to dig a little deeper, at least let me know in the comments below what you think of this. Maybe subscribe to my channel if you want to get a lot more information, a lot more exposure to all the different aspects of what it takes. Not so much just to do this thing. It's one thing to say, I do entrepreneurship. I start businesses, or I build out ideas into businesses or whatever. I'm just talking about how to be in the world, how to be entrepreneurial in the world, how to want for nothing, how to have freedom, how to have control, how to decrease anxiety, how to increase confidence, how to know that no matter what happens, you can roll with the punches and you can find your way and you can feed yourself and you can have a roof over your head because you got skills, not because you got a degree. Because at some point, if things get bad enough, the only value in a degree will be that you can burn it to keep warm for 10 seconds. But skills have permanent value. And that's what we do. That's what my channel is all about, is helping you build skills. So maybe subscribe to that. I have a free Facebook group called EntreNation, ENTRE Nation. Check that out on Facebook if you want a little more of a community feel. I have a show called Millionaire Secrets. We actually put the episodes up here on YouTube on this channel. Another good reason to subscribe, but also we have it as a podcast. If you go to millionairesecrets.com, you can subscribe to our podcast. And again, as I mentioned, if you'd like to spend a few dollars to start getting a taste of what it really takes to be a successful entrepreneur in the new digital economy, there should be a link for that below as well. I appreciate your time. Again, I invite you to leave comments or questions below, and I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Jeff Lerner signing off.